Hello everybody, how's it going? Ben Gothard here with another Project Egg interview, and today we're talking to Mike Szczesniak from New York. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to have you on, my friend. So let's jump into this interview with the first question, which is, what is your story?
Sure. So I guess my story kind of starts with sports, believe it or not. I grew up playing kind of every sport under the sun and ultimately fine-tuned that down to soccer. And when I was deciding on where to go to school, my entire college search was based off of where I could play soccer. So, I was going through, we would get the list of all the coaches from every college showcase. I would go through with my father and kind of highlight schools that had good programs and what I thought I might like to study, which at that point I had no freaking idea, right? So we were just kind of going through good schools, good reputations, and my search was based off of that. Ultimately, my guidance counselor in high school looked at my transcript and, he basically said, oh, you're good at math and sciences, you should look at engineering. And I got recruited by a really good engineering school in upstate New York. So that kind of pushed me down the path that I ultimately went on, which was studying engineering and kind of moving into the quote unquote corporate America space after that. Another really big part of my story, however, is a passion for entrepreneurship. And I'm really not sure when that started, if I'm being perfectly honest. I've always been working. My first job was in like 8th grade. Started a duct tape wallet business in like 5th grade with a couple friends. So, I've always been trying to do something. And I came across some other really good opportunities after college, kind of as I was starting my career in engineering. So those were kind of like my side hustles. And that's kind of what really got me to where I am. I met a lot of incredible people and great mentors along that path, and I continue to do so.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So, I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. I want to talk about growing up for you. What
Sure.
was your childhood like? Maybe you could describe like your family and really who you were and what you did as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very fortunate with my childhood. I come from a really, really good family. My mom's one of 5. So, there were always tons of cousins around. And it was just a really, really good atmosphere to grow up in. I grew up in a nice town, but like I kind of alluded to during my story, I worked for what I had. My parents, I think they did a really good job of making it kind of clear to me that they were always going to be there for me. And, I never had to go without necessities, right? But if there were things that I wanted, I needed to go and work for them to kind of achieve them. And that was really what I was brought up with. Like I mentioned, came from a fairly big family. I only have one sibling, my younger sister, but tons of cousins always around. So, for me, I always say that Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday because it was the day that we all kind of went to one of my uncle's house and almost all of our family was there. So it was a really, really cool day for me growing up and just a lot of sports. I come from a very athletic family, so everyone was playing sports and a lot of us played the same one. So that was really it, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, you were talking a little bit about hard work and how if you wanted something, you had to go out and get it. Like you had the necessities, but for the lagniappe, for the extra, you had to really put in that work. Can you talk about how that may have impacted your work ethic moving forward as an entrepreneur, and maybe just touch on the importance of hard work in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, for sure. So I think for me, it was a combination of what we were just speaking about, this kind of coming up, growing up in that kind of environment. But a lot of it for me was also athletics. And, I always think back on this and it's always tough to pinpoint, what kind of helped you shift something or what really helped you shed light on a certain belief that you have and kind of create that. But, I always remember training for soccer and I was just always kind of that player that in training even if it was going to kind of shave some time or add some time to a run, like I was always the person that was super anal about going over the line, going around the corner, like never cutting corners. And again, I don't know where that came from, but it was kind of this conglomeration of all these different pieces of my life up until that point. And, I've always been a firm believer in the fact that your work ethic and the energy you kind of expel is the only thing that you can really control to a certain extent. So why not do my best to control it and always try and strive to be the hardest worker in the room, and just kind of keep moving into the next room and getting around people that are working harder and pushing myself. So I think it's super relevant in really any aspect of your life, because, I always try and become the best at whatever it is that I want to do. Like if I'm going to put my time into doing something, I plan on striving to be the best that I can possibly be at it. And I think that that's incredibly relevant for entrepreneurship, because I mean, dude, if you're an entrepreneur, you're in charge of your paycheck. So you can't just sit around and make things and wait for things to happen, right? You need to go out and make it. You need to go and build the relationships. You need to go and provide value to people and try and earn time from them, or try and earn some mentorship from them, and just come with value first. So you don't have those things and you don't create those opportunities for yourself without just really going hard and working really, really hard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love what you said about how effort is the only thing we can really control, right? Because there's so many other variables. There's the timing, there's the market, there's everybody else. But you are so right. The one thing that we can control in our life is effort. So I really think that's great. And, for younger entrepreneurs or it doesn't matter the age, but for entrepreneurs early on in their journey, I think that sort of mentality is really impactful and a really positive force. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanna progress a little further. We talked a little bit about your childhood. Let's talk about in your school years. What kind of student were you? What did you like to do? What was your big focus? I know we've talked a lot about sports. Maybe that's still going to be a recurring theme, but maybe you could just shed some light on your experiences during that time.
Yeah, definitely. So I was always a fairly good student. I was like an A and B student in high school, and I always kind of steered towards those math and sciences. Like I mentioned, my mom's an accountant, my dad's a lawyer. So from that side of things, like it kind of covered everything across the board. My dad's more like the social sciences, and my mom is more on the math side, obviously. So, but I come from a family that there was a lot of heavy importance placed on education. One of my grandmother was the first woman to get a PhD in her field from MIT. And tons of engineers on that side of the family. My grandfather on my other side of the family was, just a very successful entrepreneur. And really all of my family were incredible role models for me. But I think that kind of created this importance on education and kind of curiosity for me. So in high school, I was a good student. College, I think I did fairly well also. I studied computer engineering, so it was a pretty challenging degree. And at my school was trimester. So anyone in college, typically it's a semester. You have fall and spring or whatever they're called. Trimester is a little different. There's 3 terms and they're all 10-week terms. So a typical student at my school would take 9 classes. As an engineer, you had to take 1 extra course per year, which is still pretty reasonable given the time. But it was just a little bit of an added workload, plus athletics, plus Greek life, and trying to maintain a good social life as well. So I think I did a pretty good job of managing it. And, again, I steered myself towards those math and sciences because that's just kind of how I think. I'm a software engineer now with my full-time job, and I have been since college. So I just think in ones and zeros. But yeah, man, I think I did fairly well across the board. Not ecstatic, not incredible, but I did okay.
Okay, and I want to talk a little bit about your side hustles. I believe you mentioned in maybe fifth grade you had the duct tape wallet business. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your early side hustles and really the beginning of that entrepreneurial life and the bubbling of your entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just wanted to make money, right? And in fifth grade, it's like, what else are you going to do? I think at that point, a couple other kids in school had done it, but I was like, no, I'll do it better. And basically, I started, it was called Cez Wallets because my last name's Szczesniak, nickname is Cez. So I just kind of went with it and started making wallets. People wanted them. And then slowly started figuring out, like, all right, what other colored duct tapes can I get? Like, can I get better quality duct tapes? And ultimately ended up partnering with a couple of my friends and bringing two of my other friends on board so that we could like scale it, right? But that was the first one, and just trying to make a couple bucks slinging wallets. And it was a fun experience.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, during that time, can you point to anything in particular that you learned, like the big takeaways from starting a business at such a young age?
I think the biggest thing was probably, which we touched upon during the work ethic question, it was like, okay, if I want to like make some income and I want to build something, I need to be able to provide someone with value. In this case, it was a product, and I need to work super hard to do it. I remember at one point, I think I sprained my ankle in like basketball, CYO basketball, and I was just kind of, literally all I could do all night on the weekend is just sit there. I was like, all right, well, at least I have something to occupy my time with and something productive, right? Rather than just video games. So I just was sitting there making wallets for kids in my school. And I think it's just that, it was, if I wanted to earn something, I needed to kind of work my butt off to do it.
Absolutely. And again, I think that's a great kind of recurring theme that we've been talking about for, the interview, is that if you really want something, you just have to go get it, right?
Yeah.
And it almost seems like some people think that if they just kind of wait around and wish for it to happen, like you become successful just by wishing for it, that it's just going to fall into their lap. And it's just not going to happen most of the time. It really isn't. People think that there's this perfect time to do something. And, I think it's like a Chinese proverb or something. It's that quote of like, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Second best time is right now, right? And it just comes down to the fact that perfect doesn't exist. So just start with what you have, do what you can, and fail miserably, and then just kind of reevaluate and go again and just improve. So absolutely. So, I want to move past your schooling years. I want to talk about what you did when you graduated. So maybe you could shed some light on what happened after that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I did the typical thing as I was starting to graduate, going through the tail end of my senior year. I just started applying for jobs and interviewing and trying to find something. I wanted to be in New York City, right? Because I grew up a little bit north of New York, and it was just the place I wanted to be. So I was interviewing for every software engineering position I could find in New York City or anywhere around home, because, I wouldn't have been able to live on my own. I didn't want to be a rent slave right away. So I wanted to kind of build up a little bit of a savings, live with my folks, and luckily there wouldn't be as much overhead over there. So I did the whole interviewing thing. I landed a position in downtown New York with some unpaid training, and then ultimately placement in a client. It was kind of like an IT consulting firm, and it ended up not working out because of Hurricane Sandy and budgeting issues. But I think it's the best thing that has happened in my career so far, which is kind of interesting. So basically, I was then able to go with all that training and find something on my own. And I found a job that I've been at for the last 4 years, and working with some remarkable people, solving some cool problems, and learning a ton. So that was kind of a cool reinforcement that, as at that point, I thought I was going to land a position at a client, and I was super bummed that it wasn't going to happen. But, you never know what's going to come of something, and everything happens for a reason. So I kind of moved into that space, all still in software engineering. I never really moved away from that. And I've been in the same role for about 4 years, a little over 4 years. And yeah, man, I've just been trying to grow as much as I can as an engineer.
So can you talk a little bit about what your position is in your current role, and what you've really learned, and how you've grown in these 4 years of holding this position?
Yeah, for sure. So I started at my current role as a junior developer. Basically, I'm engineering backend systems of e-commerce websites, and I've gone through junior to mid-level, and now I'm a senior level developer over the last 4 years. And the cool thing about what I do is that there was never really a shift in responsibility. It was just like I had the opportunity to take more ownership and provide better work, right? So going through those ranks, for me, it was more of just being able to kind of grab up more stuff to work on, and take more ownership and get to work on some pretty cool things. What I've learned, my field is pretty interesting because tech changes so rapidly that, and anyone that's kind of doing anything in the social media space or the internet marketing space or the e-commerce space, they can attest to this, because all the tools that they're using are probably outdated from 6 months ago. And in the engineering and the technology space, it works even faster than that. So things that I learned in school, the only thing I use that I learned in school are kind of thinking paradigms and programming paradigms. The technologies, some of them are standards, but a lot of them are changing. So that adaptability is one of the most important things that I've really learned working in the quote unquote real world as a software engineer, is just the fact that you have to be able to pick things up quickly. You have to be able to learn new technologies or learn whatever it is that you're doing. I think it's pretty adaptable in terms of the field, but it's especially relevant in software engineering. Just being able to pick things up quick and learn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, being, and I believe you said that you work on the back end of e-commerce sites.
Yeah.
Having worked on so many sites for so many years, maybe we could get a little bit technical and talk about some of the things that e-commerce store owners can do to improve their experience and really take their game to the next level from an insider's perspective.
Yeah, so since I work on the back end of things, I don't really work on the look and feel of these sites. So I'm not really working on the UX and kind of driving conversions and things of that nature. For solo operations, and I would say that it really depends on your technical expertise and how much you want to kind of invest in it. I've toyed around with Shopify sites of my own, just in terms of kind of trying to learn things about drop shipping and just running my own kind of e-commerce things, because I work for a fairly large company. But I would say the biggest piece of advice would just be to look for what tech is already out there and see how you can leverage it to cut your costs. Because at the end of the day, like when you're starting things up, it's tough to cut costs and really save money. So if you can avoid massive expenses, that's your best bet to do that. So I would say just always start with Google and start with YouTube, because half the time, like the first thing I learned in my career was don't cheat, use Google. And now I'm slowly moving that into don't cheat, use YouTube, to just learn anything that I need. So that would be the best advice I could give.
Absolutely. So, being in more of a corporate role, sometimes it might be a little bit of a conflicting idea with the whole entrepreneurship journey, right? Because we want to do what we want to do and build our own businesses and have our side hustle, but at the same time, it's probably different from corporate life. So can you talk about how you balance the two, and really just talk about your experience with having kind of a foot in both paths?
Definitely. I think that, first of all, there's the whole time thing. And I think this is one of the biggest pieces. I've been very, very fortunate that the positions that I've landed since college have all been the kind of thing where, you go and you work hard while you're there, and then you have a life outside of it. So very, very rarely am I going and staying at the office until 10 o'clock at night, right? So I have the time to invest in myself, or invest in another opportunity, or invest in learning something new. I think that's the biggest piece, and finding a role that will allow you to do that, and a company that truly values that kind of a lifestyle, is really, really important. And that's based on the industry as well. I have friends and family in certain roles where that's just how it is. They're working crazy hours because they're kind of, quote unquote, putting in their time. And I've been fortunate that that wasn't the case for my field. I think the other piece is really finding a team to work with that values your growth, and really working for a leader instead of a boss. You always see all these memes all over. If you follow any like the kind of personal development or entrepreneurship type Instagrams, they're always like showing the difference between a boss and a leader, and the boss is just kind of sitting on a chair getting carried, and the leader is like leading the pack, pulling. Like, sometimes it comes down to just the verbiage, like saying let's instead of go do this. But when you have someone like that that really values your, or puts a big emphasis on your growth in your career, and someone that kind of really follows or really goes along the sense of, let's help this person grow instead of what value can I extract out of them right now and help our company grow. I think that is a huge, huge piece as well, because good managers and good leaders and good mentors think and help their employees and the people on their team further than just their role or their job. And that support is really, really important. I think those are two big pieces.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you said you were in this position for the past 4 years.
Yeah.
In that time, what has the side hustle looked like for you? What have you been doing as your side hustle in that time?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the biggest side hustle, and I think that this will be like, this is the case for a lot of people, even if they don't realize it, but it has been building my personal brand. And I think the personal brand is one of the biggest assets that we have, right? What do people think of us on the internet? And not in your typical like kind of drama type of way that people think about it, like I'm afraid of what they think of me, but really, how do you position yourself in social media? Are you using social media just as a kind of vehicle to spread news or spread negativity, or are you sharing things that will add value to people's lives? So whether people consider that a side hustle or not, am I driving revenue from my personal brand? No, not right now. Maybe I will in the future, who knows? But right now it's just kind of been sharing what's important to me and holding myself accountable through that vehicle. So that's the biggest thing. Another thing is network marketing. Network marketing has been one of my streams of income for the last 4 years, and it gets a bad rap at times, but I think there's a lot of value in that industry, not just from a product perspective, but from a personal growth perspective. And, Robert Kiyosaki called network marketing business school for entrepreneurs. So if people are into personal development and they're into entrepreneurship, finding one of those vehicles will be incredible for your growth as an entrepreneur or just as a person, just surrounding yourself with those people. And then the third is my podcast, and that's my biggest passion right now. I run a podcast called Learn, Grow, Earn. It's a personal growth podcast for millennials, very similar to this show of yours, Ben. And that's been just a way for me to kind of get my voice out. I want to do a lot more professional speaking in the future and really try and just scale conversations that I was having with people that, I was learning a ton from. Really, I want to just give a platform for people to share ideas and try and bring as much free value and build just a positive, uplifting community of people, because similar to network marketing, like surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded is so, so, so valuable. And I wanted to be able to add value to the community by doing something like that. So those were the main three.
Fantastic. So let's break them down one by one, and I really want to dig deep into exactly what you're doing and how you're going about doing these things, because I think it's really interesting that you're kind of doing these four things simultaneously. So when you say you're building your personal brand, what exactly are you doing? How are you building your personal brand?
Yeah, so that's kind of just something that has pieced itself together over the years. And oddly enough, I think back to it, and I always think of my personal growth journey as really when I started diving into entrepreneurship after college, not really the duct tape wallet stuff, but in maybe like 23 years old or so. And what's funny is that I look back on my Instagram, which I started like a year before that, and I had already been sharing kind of motivational things. So I guess it stems a little bit further than I thought, but that's really how it started. I wanted to kind of build this image of my Instagram feed. And I wanted to make sure that I was sharing kind of positive and mindset related stuff. And that's kind of grown over. That's been the one piece that has been consistent throughout. And that's across all social media channels. If I see a video that I think is absolute fire and I think that a lot of people will value from it, I'll share it with my feed. I'll share it with my network. I'll share it depending on the video. I'll share it on whatever platform I think is relevant. But, mainly with my Instagram, as I've kind of gone through these different pieces of the journey, the quality has upgraded, and, you start to realize how you can position your account in a little bit or format your account a little bit of a different way and just try and make it look more professional. But I think the biggest thing, and a lot of people are starting to shed more light on this, which I think is awesome, is that at the end of the day, it has to be you. So you need to make sure that whatever brand you're trying to build for yourself is really in line with who you are, because otherwise you're just going to be burning yourself out trying to be something that you're not. And if you're in the entrepreneurship space, it would be a pretty good chance that brand that you build is going to lead to business relationships. And if that's not who you are, those relationships won't last. They won't kind of come to fruition the way that you want them to. So whatever it is that you're doing to build your personal brand, you need to make sure that you're just being authentic.
Absolutely. So I think there's still kind of that question of how do you find out what that thing is that you, or how you want to position yourself, like what that one thing is that you want to focus on, right? Because let's say you spend all this time and energy and you're building up your brand and positioning yourself in a certain way, and then you decide, oh, I'm actually not that passionate about it. I want to go here, and I want to go here, and I want to go here, right? How do you know when you're finally at that spot where you can say, all right, this is me, this is what I'm going to do, this is really how I want to position myself, it's time to go all in?
Curiosity. I think that the biggest skill that anyone can have is just perpetual curiosity. And the only way in my mind to really think like, okay, this is me, this is what I want to do, let's go for it, is how passionate do I feel about it? Do I feel like I'm really doing something good? Am I excited about what I'm doing? And if the answer is yes, just go all in. And as soon as it stops being yes, pivot and get curious and find what the next thing is. And that it's the same kind of thing. Like we talked about failure before, and you're never going to know until you go through the motions and really give it a test. And if it's not it for you, and you know that it's not it, it's time to pivot and just kind of figure out what the next thing is that you're excited about, and just get curious until you need to get curious again. So that's all I got on that.
That's great advice. That's great advice. So, I think that's important for people again who are just starting out, right? Mm-hmm. Because you might dabble in this and figure out you don't like it, and then move into this and move into that. But I think over time you can eventually hone in on at least the industry that you want to be in, right? At least the industry, and then you can pivot within that industry, like you said, whenever you need to get curious. So I think that was great advice, and I think that if those who are listening, you really listen to those words and really try to see how that can be implemented into your own life, I think that could really help. So thanks for sharing that. So we talked about personal branding. I wanna touch a little bit more on that, and then I want to move on to the second one. But you mentioned your Instagram account, and you mentioned a feed, so I'm assuming that's Facebook. But what are your main platforms that you're on, and how can we find you on those platforms?
Yeah, so right now the biggest is Instagram, and that's my biggest platform for my personal account and for the podcast. So on my personal, it's really just kind of this eclectic collage of my life. So there's a ton of fitness. I'm currently training for a powerlifting competition. So there's a lot on that. That's always been a huge piece of my life. And oddly enough, most of my network are fitness entrepreneurs. So I'm just kind of surrounded by that. So that's a huge piece. A little bit of lifestyle, a little bit of personal development. It's really everything. And that's just my name, at Mike Szczesniak on Instagram. And then I'm just Mike Szczesniak on Facebook. Feel free to connect with me over there. And that's what I do to kind of share a little bit longer pieces of information. So whether it's just sharing videos or kind of anything that's longer than a typical Instagram caption will find its way onto my Facebook. And then in terms of the podcast, everything's just at Learn, Grow, Earn. So that's a combination of motivational quotes, just making sure that our community is aware of new podcast episodes that come out, or mini clips. We do uploads Monday through Friday. So sharing that kind of content over there to make sure people are up to date.
Fantastic. So I definitely highly recommend everybody that's listening to go check out all of Mike's platforms and the podcast and your personal stuff. Definitely highly recommend that. So anyways, let's talk a little bit about the network marketing side, because like you said, and I do think it's interesting that you brought this up, a lot of the times that industry kind of gets a bad rap. So can you talk a little bit about your experiences in that industry and really how it helped you grow and learn and become the person that you are today?
Yeah. For me, network marketing was the spark. And what I mean by that is I was hungry, and it gave me an opportunity. It gave me a vehicle. Now, the great thing about network marketing is that it provides a vehicle with a very low cost of entry. But I think that's also the reason that it gets a bad rap, because people don't treat it seriously. And then all of a sudden, the people that were saying, this isn't a get rich quick scheme, is it? When they don't get rich quick, they're the first to bash it, right? Because they didn't have a lot of skin in the game, I guess. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But for me, I was hungry. I wanted an opportunity, and I understood that I wouldn't get anything without putting in work. So I didn't really fall victim to that trap, I guess. But the biggest thing was, you learn how to build a business. You learn how to grow a network. You learn how important it is to invest in yourself, both in terms of your time and in terms of your finances when it comes to getting to seminars and going on trips and really kind of immersing yourself in whatever environment it is that you need to grow. So that was the spark for all of it. I had started reading a little bit before that, but not as intensely as I did after that. You know, I hated reading growing up, man. I absolutely hated it. I read like 4 books in college, all 4 years. And I read 30 books last year. You know, so it really shifted my mindset in terms of that. And it just put me in contact with a number of highly successful people that were not just business partners. You know, people that I don't work with anymore that I still keep in contact with, and people that will be lifelong friends because of that industry. So it really started a lot for me. But strictly in terms of personal development, it started this domino effect of putting me in touch with resources, or resources meaning books or audios or videos or whatever, as well as introducing me to a number of incredible people that have turned into friends, have turned into mentors, you name it. And people that frankly have turned into families. So that gets a little sappy, but it's honestly the truth. And it has been an incredible experience.
That's awesome. And you know, it really seems like you are very passionate about that industry. So it's nice to hear that. And I like to hear from both sides of the argument. So, you know, it is really, again, refreshing to hear your side of it. And that's awesome. That's awesome. So let's move on to your podcast. Can you talk a little bit more about exactly what you do on the podcast, what you talk about? Is it more interview style? Is it you talking? And you know, just give us the whole crash course on Learn, Grow, Earn.
Yeah, for sure. So it's very similar to your platform here, all interview based. And the whole thing is that Learn, Grow, Earn, I always say that it's a podcast about the journey. And the whole idea is that we all learn differently. And we shouldn't get discouraged because we don't like one vehicle. So a constant recurring theme as I was, you know, going through the motions the last couple of years and growing myself and growing my brand, which we talked about, right? I was sharing a lot on social media about personal development. And a lot of what I heard was, oh, Mike, like, that's awesome. Like, it's so cool that you read so much, but I don't like to read. So whatever. Like, it's just not for me, or, you know, just things like that. And somewhere along the lines, like, people got this idea that I liked reading. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was all the books, but I just like what I get out of it. Like, I don't like the act of reading. I don't, and I still don't, but I have a huge bookshelf in my apartment full of countless books that I've read, you know, which is hilarious to me. If you told me that a couple of years ago, I would have laughed you out of the room. But, you know, I really wanted to create this group and this widespread group of guests that everyone could pull something from, because everyone learns differently. And I wanted to highlight all those areas. So we dive into people's journeys and what vehicles they've used throughout and how they've derived lessons throughout their life. And ultimately, the goal is to build something that everyone can kind of benefit from. So we do full episodes every Monday. And then what we recently started doing is mini clips. So just to pump out more actionable advice for everyone, we'll have like about a 2-minute clip every day, Tuesday through Friday. So we have one question per day. It'll be the same guest all week. And all of that will just be quick, actionable advice. So you get kind of a new take on an answer to the same question. So everyone can kind of just pull from it. It's super consumable, whether you're just kind of walking to the train station or walking on a treadmill, doing your cardio, whatever. 2 minutes is super consumable for people that might not want to dive into a 30-minute interview just at the moment. So kind of covering all the bases there, and we've been doing that a couple weeks. So it's been an exciting process. You know, I didn't know how to build a podcast, and frankly, I still don't. I'm just kind of going through it and failing and then adapting and seeing where life takes me. But that's basically the rundown.
That's fantastic, man. And you know, I wish you the best of luck with your podcast. It sounds awesome. So, you know, we talked a little bit about your past, and we talked about you know, you growing up and your childhood and your school days and your corporate life and your side hustle. But I want to talk about right now, in the present. What is the biggest thing that is on your mind right now in the present?
So immediate throughout the rest of 2017, my absolute major focus is growing the podcast and, more importantly, growing the community around it. There's a number of things that I'm working on with respect to that in terms of just really community building. So in-person event series, Instagram campaigns, constantly refactoring the audio that we're putting out. Like I mentioned, we just started doing the daily uploads. So things like that to really try and bring more value to people and build that community aspect of it. Because I mean, play counts are great. Numbers are great. Like, it's really, really gratifying to see that more people are consuming your content, but I want to make sure that people are getting value from it. And I want to build this community where people are kind of helping each other along the way. So that's the major thing for 2017. And then just to kind of add on to that a little bit, like I mentioned, public speaking and professional speaking is a huge focus of mine. So I've been going through I joined Toastmasters a couple months back and just kind of speeding through that, meeting some incredible people. And ultimately the goal is to be doing a TEDx talk in 2018.
Wow. I definitely want to hear that. And you know, I again wish you the best luck with the TED Talk.
Thank you.
So, you know, we talked a little bit about your past. We talked about the present and, you know, your 2017 goals. But where do you see yourself going in the future? I mean, when you think of Mike, you know, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, what do you think about? Where do you see yourself? What do you want to happen in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think kind of painting that picture is really, really important. For me, down the line, you know, as I've kind of gone on to build a family and whatever it is, right now I'm 27 years old. I live in just outside of New York. I just moved out of New York City, but I still work in New York City. So, you know, I basically have no responsibilities right now. So I have a lot of time to create what I want in life and try and put in the foundation to sculpt the life that I want. So down the line, you know, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is down the line, when I'm creating that family and I really building what I want out of my life, I definitely see myself running my own company. And the reason I want to do that is because the impact I want to have on this world, I feel like that is the best vehicle for me to do it. Now, if anyone follows Gary Vee or anything like that, they're probably aware of his mindset on the fact that, like, sometimes some people are just very well-rounded to be a number 2 or a number 3 or a number 4 at a company, and not everyone's going to run their own. And I just feel like creating something and partnering with the right people that I'm passionate about is going to be my vehicle to bring the biggest impact to this world. You know, I have a big pillar that I try and live by of impact over income. And I just feel like entrepreneurship is my vehicle. It's just a gut feeling of mine. So that's really what I see. Do I know what that is ultimately going to become? No. You know, right now I'm really passionate about a healthy lifestyle, passionate about fitness, and I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. So if I can create something that blends all that, that'd be amazing. But who knows, maybe in a couple of years, I'm going to figure out that I need to pivot, and then I'm going to need to get curious again. So I don't necessarily know what that company or what that impact will be, but I know the impact's going to be positive, and I have a good feeling that entrepreneurship is the vehicle.
That's fantastic. And I really like what you said about how entrepreneurship is your vehicle to make an impact, right? And I think it's important for people to think of what do they want to accomplish, right? You said you want to make an impact. Well, if they want to make an impact, how are they going to accomplish that, right? It may be through business. It may be through something else. But I really think that that's important to figure out early on what you want to really become your vehicle, right? And I like the word vehicle too. I'm using your language because I appreciate it. But figuring out what vehicle you want, I think that is so important. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Definitely.
So I want to talk a little bit about legacy because you said you want to make an impact, and you see yourself maybe at the head of a company or doing something in that regards. But what do you want to leave behind? What do you want your legacy to be?
It's an interesting question, and I don't know that I've ever really put it into words. Legacy is super important to me, but I've always left it at that one word. I've always been working towards legacy and just having this positive image in my mind. I talked a little bit about some of my role models in my family earlier, and just basically every single one of my grandparents, a lot of people in my family that I just look up to. And unfortunately, I lost some of them over the years. And I just think about the impact that they had on my life and the legacy they left in terms of instilling ideas in me and instilling values in me. And that's what I kind of want to continue and leave my own spin on. Ultimately, I guess in terms of just the values that I leave and the mindset that I leave, I want it to be very along those lines, hard work, mindset, taking ownership and taking responsibility for yourself. And I think that those are very, very powerful values that I hope to leave for people that I care about and my loved ones. But obviously there's a big piece there as well that is sometimes talked about in a negative light, but there's the financial side of it as well. And, my goal in life has always been to achieve success so that I could provide for the ones that I care about. So that's obviously a piece of it as well. I always want, similar to the values that my parents instilled in me, I feel like I want people, I want my family to understand that you have to work for what you have, but I never want them to suffer. So that would be another big piece for me.
Fantastic, man. So I want to lighten the mood a little bit with a few quick kind of fun questions. So just
Sure.
Whatever you think of first, just go with it. Okay, so if you could be any animal in the world, what animal would you be and why?
So that's funny. One of my friends shared this on Facebook the other day, and I was looking through the answers of people, and there are a lot of really good answers. My gut says that I want to be my dog because I have a chocolate lab named Shaq, and he's awesome. So just out of respect for him, I'm going with that. But there are a lot of dope animals out there that have some pretty cool values. And if you want to get all philosophical about it, being a lion or an eagle, there are some cool things, but I'm going with Shaq, dude. I have to do it.
That's awesome. Shout out to Shaq. That's
Yeah.
great. So if you could go back to any time period, which time period would you go back to and why?
High school soccer. That there's a lot that I'd want to go back to, but that's the immediate reaction. My high school soccer team was a super tight-knit group, and it was where I really started to realize that I wanted to pursue soccer through college and continue. I still play now, so a lot of really good friendships came out of that. A state championship came out of that, and when the final whistle blew at that state championship, just kind of seeing the faces on my parents, it was the most incredible feeling in the world. So there are just so many positives of that. You know, a lot of my family was all there, and all the big pillars of my life were kind of together at that point.
Wow, that's incredible. So if you could go back to any time period and talk to any one person, who would you talk to, and what would y'all talk about?
That's a really good question. I would say I would probably go back and talk to the Wright brothers. I think that is it's one of the coolest entrepreneurial stories, in my opinion. And I don't know everything about it, so I encourage people to do their own diligence on it. But the little bit that I have read about it is basically no one thought they were going to succeed. And there were companies throwing tons of funding at way more kind of experienced and basically throwing money at engineers that had every opportunity to come up with the airplane before the Wright brothers did, but it was just like sheer willpower and just hunger for achievement and hunger for problem solving. So it's one of my favorite entrepreneurial stories of all time. So I feel like that'd be a really, really cool conversation, just kind of extracting whatever knowledge I can from their story.
Absolutely. So Mike, I want to thank you so much for jumping on this interview. I really do appreciate your time, and you know, I think the listeners will absolutely appreciate you as well. So I want to thank you very much.
Yeah, Ben, thanks so much again for having me, man. This was a blast.
Absolutely, man. I got one more question for you, and then I'll let you go. But is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
I think the biggest piece, and this is something that I strive to work on every single day, but it's something that I'm really proud of my growth in over the last couple years. And I alluded to it slightly in certain answers, but it's really this idea of responsibility and ownership. Over the years, I've kind of realized the importance of that word, responsibility. And I think it's honestly the most important word in the world. And the reason for that is when we take responsibility, I am a believer that when we take responsibility in our lives, we take back the power of the situation. Whereas when we fall into a victim mindset, we're giving and we're placing blame, we're giving away the responsibility, and ultimately we're giving away all control we have over the situation. So I'm a big believer in maintaining responsibility, and it's something that, you know, I fail at regularly, just like everyone else, but I try and keep it in the forefront of my mind, and it's been a really important piece of my growth over the last couple of years.
Fantastic. So Mike, again, I want to thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. And to everybody listening, I want to thank you. Y'all, the reason that we do this, and if we can impact you in a positive way, then that is good for me. That's the whole point. So I love y'all. Mike, thank you again, man. This has been another Project Egg interview. Today we've been talking to Mike Szczesniak from New York. Take care, everybody.